There are a lot of movies out there that everyone will point to and say, you there, you're one of the worst movies ever made. Sometimes this reputation's deserved. Other times, it's really not. I mean, come on guys. I'll be real, Phantom Menace, not that bad, especially compared to the remakes, just no. But then sometimes there's a movie that you'll see and you'll hate it, but you won't necessarily say it's one of the worst. You'll acknowledge that it has flaws and that it definitely deserves a negative reputation, but it can't be one of the worst, not when things like all these are out there. And for both of us here at Media Mementos, that would be the Garbage Pail Kids movie. Yeah, this thing is known to be one of the worst pieces of cinema of all time. It has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, tons of online internet critics rip it to shreds. There was even gonna be a revival of the movie, kinda rebooting it all so it would have a better reputation amongst movie lovers. But guess what? It ended up getting shelved because nobody wanted to give it a shot. The original Garbage Pail Kids movie's reputation was that bad that nobody could give it a shot ever again. This movie is terrible, absolutely, but it's not one of the worst. Honestly, it's just a generic bad kids film with one exception. It's dark tone, and I'm not talking about dark tone in the way that Don Bluth makes his movies, where all the main characters go through various hardships and come out okay in the end, learning an important lesson or developing as people. No, this is the dark in the sense of, this is just uncomfortable. It's not approachable, it's not fun. Kids wouldn't like this at all. It's dark, it's twisted, and not in any fun way either. All it really is just gross and mean, and honestly, kids love that kind of stuff sometimes, but there's a limit. If you go too far, even kids will say, this sucks. That's what happened with the Garbage Pail Kids movie, but it's not really anything more than that. Is it appropriate for kids? Absolutely not. Is the stay at home for the ugly a really stupid idea? Yeah, totally. Although, it does make sense in the narrative. The whole point of the movie is to teach kids that ugliness is on the inside, not the outside. Yeah, that's a good lesson. Kids can get swept up in the superficial world just like the rest of us. Now, the only problem with this moral is that the Garbage Pail Kids are ugly inside and out. They're mean, they're cruel, they're gross. But I guess they have a good heart? Question mark? I first saw this movie in middle school and I thought it was the worst thing ever, but upon rewatching it, not really. It sucks, yeah, but there's way worse movies out there, especially for kids. On paper, this movie has a lot of concepts that, given a more competent crew or maybe a couple more rewrites, it could have worked pretty well. I think the whole lesson, once again, is very good to teach children, especially applying to the Garbage Pail Kids. Having the guy not get the girl in the end is a plus. Also, there's a very big age difference between them, so I don't think it would have worked in general. And yeah, that romance is kinda creepy, especially because I'm sure the actress who played this girl is an adult. Yeah, let's not think about that. The puppetry, though cheap, is doing the best with what it has, and admittedly, unlike, say, the Looney Tunes in the 1960s, they don't have to cobble together a half project. I think that when they're not moving, these puppets look alright. They're accurate representations of what's on the cards. Yeah, it's just the lip movements that leave a lot to be desired. So if this movie's bad but doesn't really stand out from other bad children's films, then how come it has the reputation that it has now? Well, let's take a look at the history of the Garbage Pail Kids to find out. More specifically, its history with popular culture and the mainstream audience at large. When the Garbage Pail Kids movie was released, it received very poor reviews, like I said. It has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a lot of those reviews come from the time. People called it dark, people called it gross, people called it uncomfortable, and all of this is true. It even got nominated for several Razzie Awards, though it didn't win any. So, of course, judging by this, that would lead to the assumption that everybody really hated the movie, but it just wasn't bad enough to receive the Razzies. Yes and no. While it certainly was hated enough to get all those Razzies, it's also important to note that nobody saw this thing. It had a $1 million budget and it grossed 1.6. Even when adjusting for inflation, that still is a very poor return. The $1 million budget also doesn't include advertising costs. But judging by the fact that usually, at least in modern terms, half the budget of the movie is put into advertisements. In other words, you take the budget and you add 50%, there you go, that's all the money that was spent. It's safe to say that the Garbage Pail Kids didn't really spend much, if anything, on ads. That would mean that the lack of information about the film combined with poor public opinion meant that this film flew under the radar. I'm sure the only reason that it was nominated at the Razzies was because someone looked at these newspaper reviews or TV reviews from movie critics and went, yeah, this will be funny to nominate. Let's go back to the Rotten Tomatoes score. These online critics here, do you know how many actually reviewed this movie? 13. Once again, nobody really knew about the film, nobody cared about it, and it just vanished for a while. But then, someone dug it up. And I do mean dug because, hello, it's the Nostalgia Critic. Oh, great. This is actually the reason why I watched the film back then. I was a gigantic Nostalgia Critic fan, and basically anytime he would say something about a movie, I'd go, yeah, that's probably it. I'm not gonna bother watching it myself because I watched his review and I kind of get the gist of it. So yes, if he says that this movie's bad, then I say it's bad too. Except the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory one, I always disagreed with that because his reasoning was objectively bad. Fight me. So when watching this movie, I went in thinking it was gonna be the worst thing ever. Even then, I didn't think it was the worst, but I did think it was one of the worst. But then after breaking off from the Nostalgia Critic and realizing that he's done a lot of really bad things, like the whole Justin Carmichael situation, how he tried to sweep that under the rug and treat him like a hero after he died. Yeah, look that up if you don't know what I'm talking about. But anyways, I started rewatching a lot of those movies that either he made reviews of and I skipped out on, or ones that I watched after seeing his review and making my judgment based on his. And this is how I found a lot of movies that I really truly liked. Why did I bring this up? Not only does it add some important backstory to this whole thing, but it shows you how Garbage Pail Kids got its reputation. When Doug Walker dug this thing back up, everyone decided to piggyback his opinion because back then, everyone loved the Nostalgia Critic. He wasn't this kind of internet cringe pariah that he is now. This guy was big enough to rival the angry video game nerds, so of course, people were gonna follow whatever he said. Now, I'm not gonna use this video as a vehicle to rip apart Doug Walker's style of reviewing or his takes on media, no. I'm just explaining that this happens with not just the Nostalgia Critic, but with, well, any kind of popular creator, really. They'll say one thing and then their fans will go, yeah, I agree with you, without actually giving it a shot. They don't feel the need to go out and give it a shot. Why would they? The content creator in question made a video that was so in-depth that they don't feel like they really have to go watch it for themselves. The video will suffice just fine. This can be pretty dangerous because there will be a lot of, well, there's no better word for it, but uninformed people running around spouting off the same echo chamber opinion without doing research or any sort of personal reflection of their own. A big example of this is Don Bluth's film Rock-a-Doodle. Once again, this happened because of the Nostalgia Critic. He gave a pretty critical review that I don't agree with in the slightest, but maybe more on that some other day, probably not. So a lot of people judge the film without really watching it, or when they watch it for themselves, they end up parroting Doug Walker's opinion because he's big, he's powerful, he's popular. Obviously, he's got the right idea. But then when we made our video about Rock-a-Doodle, the first one to be specific, not the second one, though the second one had a little bit of it too, a bunch of people told us that they watched the film because of our review, and lo and behold, they liked it. Now, did they like it because of our video? I guess, maybe, it's possible, but they did bring up some points that they liked that we didn't mention at all, so maybe not? Who's to say? So what's the point of this video, you ask? Is it just to bash on Doug Walker? No, of course not. He's not the subject of this video, even if he was mentioned a lot. The whole point is for you, the audience, to give things a chance. Sometimes it's important to form an opinion of your own, because if you don't, things like this will happen where this strictly 3.5 out of 10 movie is gonna get hailed as one of the worst things ever. It might be a long, difficult process, but if more people are informed about these things are gonna be a whole lot fairer in the movie world. Garbage Pail Kids may be bad, but it's not one of the worst. Are there other films out there like this? Who knows, but if there are, you probably won't hear us talk about them unless they're really good or really bad, contrary to popular opinion or something. I don't know. It's kind of hard to judge because we don't take requests and we mostly make videos based off of what we're inspired to do, so let the search begin, folks! Maybe go out and start your own search for movies that don't deserve their reputation, whether it be for the better or for the worse. Now, it's in your hands. Ball's in your court. Third thing. And now, on to the outro. Well, folks, thanks for watching the video. What'd you guys think? Have you seen the Garbage Pail Kids movie? If so, what do you think of it? Comment below and let us know because we're always excited to hear what you guys have to say. Real quick, I'd like to thank our Patreon executive producers, Leaf Razor, Azarius, Whoopdoo, Michaela Bellamy, MD the Dude, and Blackjack. If you too would like your name read at the end of every Meet and Mementos video, then consider donating to our Patreon, which has a link in the description below. And now, it's time for the comment of the day. Today's comment of the day goes to Han and Leia, oldest son. Well said, Trevor. That's me, by the way. Well said. I think another example of someone who didn't start off too big is George Lucas. Did he start off big when it came to Star Wars? No, he didn't. Just like Peter Jackson, George had to practice as to how he could be a better writer and director for feature films. Prior to Star Wars, George had made 2 other films, being THX 1138 and American Graffiti. It may not be the same, but I think it's a good analogy. To be honest, you and Billy are one of the most educative channels in my opinion. Thank you very much. Not just for those kind words of flattery, which yes, that does mean a lot to us, but also yeah, thank you for your insight as to George Lucas. It's true. Some of the greatest directors we've ever seen, like again Peter Jackson or George Lucas here, Chris Columbus, and so on. They started off as little tiny minor influences and grew to become something bigger, you know? That could be you too. That most certainly can. It's just gonna take a little bit of work and a lot of persistence, but if you got the goods, you'll get there sooner or later. Hopefully. Just don't be afraid to take that McDonald's job in the meantime, okay? Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time!